North Carolina and Virginia will both hold their primaries on Tuesday, on Super Tuesday, as we get deeper and deeper into this election calendar, Jessica.
And speaking of the election calendar, Trump also picking up some delegates today in Michigan, Missouri. Fill us in on that.
Yeah, CNN can now project that President Trump will win all 54 delegates at stake in the Missouri caucuses. That state caucusing today. Idaho will be caucusing today as well. Trump was also awarded all the delegates at the Michigan Republican Convention today, all the delegates that were at stake, 39 of them. That is in addition to the 12 he won last month when the state held its convention. A little bit of drama in Michigan, though. There are multiple people right now who claim to be the GOP leader in that state, which is a bit of a problem for the Republican Party as we get deeper into this election cycle, because that is such an important state and such a big swing state. If they don't have their ducks in a row, you know, that if the state's going to be won on the margins, that could be trouble for them, Jessica.
Yeah, Michigan's going to be a big one coming up in the fall. Steve Contorno for us in Richmond, Virginia tonight. Thanks so much. All right, and I want to ask you before we let you go about some of these caucuses that are going on tonight. Just into CNN, we are projecting that Trump will win the caucuses in Missouri, in Michigan, and Idaho. And that makes his delegate count far and away ahead of Nikki Haley, 51-4 there. And now we head in, Ron, as you well know, we head into Super Tuesday on Tuesday, where so many delegates are up for grabs. What reason do you think Haley should continue to soldier on? She has said she's committed to staying in through Super Tuesday. How do you think Super Tuesday could push this dynamic forward?
Yeah, first of all, you know, no Republican other than an incumbent president has ever won every primary and caucus. Al Gore did it among the Democrats. So Trump is on an historic pace. But, you know, even as he's doing that, we are seeing this consistent 30% or so higher in some states when she's had time to campaign supporting Haley. She has made that point. There is a portion of the Republican coalition, mostly college-educated, suburban, that is still resistant to Trump. Not sure there's much point in making that point beyond Super Tuesday. She's demonstrated it. The question of what she does next, I think, will be no different if she stayed in the race for a month than if she got out the day after Super Tuesday.
All right, more to come. Ron Brownstein, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Welcome. I'm Yasmin Basugan, coming to you live from MSNBC World Headquarters here in New York City. Welcome to Alex What Reports. We begin this hour on the campaign trail with Republican presidential contests underway in Michigan, Missouri, and Idaho. And ahead of Super Tuesday, Donald Trump is out campaigning, speaking in North Carolina as he caps a week of legal...
Excuse you 1 minute, and I'll come right back to you. We're getting breaking news right now out of Missouri. NBC News is projecting that former President Donald Trump will be the winner of the Republican caucus in that state. We will have more on the details as we get into it just a moment. But let me go back to you, Congresswoman. You were answering my question on voting rights.
Absolutely. I mean, John Lewis said it's up to every generation to do its part to build our democracy, to save our democracy, to fight for our democracy. And now it's up to every generation to vote in this election like our very democracy depends on it. Republicans believe, you know, the Voting Rights Act was bipartisan. Every time it was reauthorized, it was done so on a bipartisan basis. But since the Shelby decision gutting the Voting Rights Act, Republicans seem to believe the only way that they can win is by suppressing the vote. And we have seen a rash of voter suppression laws across the country, not just in the South, except here in Virginia, where we actually passed the Voting Rights Act. And that is the only way that Republicans feel that they can win, is by, you know, bending the rules to suit their will. We need to come out and vote no matter the cost, because our very democracy depends on it. The progress that we built, you know, on the civil rights movement is facing a backlash right now. And we have to make sure that we are vigilant to preserve our democracy, to preserve our progress that we've made on civil rights, on voting rights, on reproductive rights, and much, much more.
And in the last year, we've seen voting rights, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. We've seen affirmative action, women's right to choose, many of the rights that came out of the 60s and early 70s, gutted by this Supreme Court, 3 of whom Donald Trump nominated to be on the court. But let me go back to the politics. What are your thoughts about Missouri heavily going to Trump in this breaking news story I just read?
You know, I'm not surprised. It has been clear that Donald Trump is the likely nominee. It is clear that he has taken over the Republican Party and about to put his daughter-in-law in charge at the RNC. So I'm not at all surprised by the result, but it makes crystal clear what is at stake in this election. This is going to be an election between, do you want another 4 years of Donald Trump that'll roll back progress on reproductive freedom, on voting rights, on civil rights, and on climate action, or do you want to continue the progress that we've made under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, rebuilding this economy, protecting reproductive freedom, protecting the right to vote, and protecting our very democracy?
Joining me now is my political panel, Michelle Goldberg, opinion columnist for the New York Times, and Jeff Timmer, senior advisor of the Lincoln Project. Jeff, we just mentioned the breaking news about Trump winning the Republican caucus in Missouri. Let's also get to Michigan. Former President Trump already won the primary contest in the state, and NBC News is projecting he will sweep the caucuses, though nearly a third of GOP primary voters voted against him. What will actually be on display tonight is disunity inside the state Republican Party, where the rivalry between its far-right former leader and her more establishment-friendly replacement has taken place. We heard a lot about the uncommitted vote in Michigan on the Democratic side, but what do you make of this infighting amongst Republicans in this battleground state for November?
Well, I think that the Republican Party is doing everything it can to aid the Democrats and Joe Biden in Michigan in particular. Most of the coverage last Tuesday out of Michigan, I think, got it wrong. The uncommitted vote in the Democratic primary was right within the historic norms. That's not to say that Joe Biden doesn't have issues with his progressive base, especially with Gen Z voters, but those are fixable. What the numbers around Trump show in Michigan is that 2 or 3 out of every 10 voters voting in the Republican primary, and 70% of those voting for Nikki Haley are never, ever, ever going to vote for Donald Trump. That's the real story. That's how Michigan should be covered. Among college-educated voters in Michigan, especially women, chlamydia is more popular than Donald Trump.
Let me ask you this, Michelle. I'm out of time, but I have to ask you, what do you think, what do you make out of Trump winning Michigan and Missouri and taking all of the delegates?
I mean, this is his party. You know, the people who, as Jeff said, the people who are voting for Nikki Haley most of them are probably not going to vote for the Republican ticket in November. The Republican Party is now a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump family, and it's suitable that he's about to install his daughter-in-law at the top of the RNC so he can turn it into a slush fund for his legal troubles.
All right, Jeff Timmer and Michelle Goldberg, thank you both for being with us.
Nomination fight. Donald Trump wins big in the Michigan and Missouri caucuses, and we could have results from Idaho this hour. With more voters making their voices heard as Trump and Nikki Haley count down to Super Tuesday, we'll take a look at some of the key issues at stake throughout the show. Trump on trial. So much hinges on what the Supreme Court decides about Donald Trump's claim of presidential immunity. Former federal judge J. Michael Ludick joins me live to discuss why he thinks the court decided to take up the historic case, how long they'll drag this out, and how it all plays into Trump's legal strategy of delay. And the kick the can Congress. Once again, it bought more time to avoid a government shutdown. And once again, a Republican House Speaker is feeling the heat from his own conference. Congresswoman Becca Balint of the House Budget Committee joins me live to bring us inside the chaos. I'm Jonathan Capehart. This is The Saturday Show. We begin this busy Saturday evening with breaking news. Our eyes are on Michigan, Missouri, and Idaho, where Republicans in those states are holding presidential caucuses today. NBC News projects that Donald Trump won the most delegates at Michigan's nominating convention. Altogether, between the convention and Michigan's primary on Tuesday, Donald Trump won 51 delegates and Nikki Haley won 4. NBC also projects Trump won the Missouri Republican caucus, picking up 54 delegates. Trump is expected to sweep Idaho as well. We could get those results within the hour, and we'll bring them to you as soon as they come in. Let's go back to that breaking news tonight about Republican presidential nominating contests in Michigan and Missouri. NBC News projects that Donald Trump will win the Michigan nominating convention that allocated the remaining 39 delegates after Tuesday's Michigan Republican primary. NBC News also projects Trump has won the Missouri caucuses, picking up 54 delegates. We are expecting results out of Idaho any moment. As Trump closes in on his party's nomination, new polls show him in a tight head-to-head hypothetical matchup with President Biden. A Bloomberg Morning Consult poll released this week shows President Biden trailing Trump in all 7 swing states, but since many of the results fall within the poll's margin of error, the race is essentially tied in many of those states. Joining me now, Christina Greer, Moynihan Public Scholars Fellow at City College of New York and author of Black Ethnics, Race, Immigration, and the Pursuit of the American Dream. And Susan Del Percio, Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst. Thank you both very much for being here. So, Susan, let's talk about these results coming in from Michigan and Missouri. Clean sweep it's looking like for Donald Trump tonight. Do you think we will see more of the same come Super Tuesday?
Oh, I think we're going to see a lot more of the same on Super Tuesday. I mean, Haley will probably pick up a couple of delegates here or there, but there is no expectation of her winning any, state or picking up a significant amount of delegates. It's important to recognize that Trump, for as undisciplined as he is, the campaign itself has been disciplined. Going back a couple of years now, they really set up these primaries and had states change the rules to his benefit, that they're not necessarily proportional. They are once above 50, winner takes all. So he set it up and he's going to, get the reward for it.
Now to the breaking news from the West. NBC News projects Donald Trump is the winner of Idaho's Republican caucus. That adds 32 delegates to Trump's tally for a total of 125 delegates won today. Included in that, NBC News projects Trump picked up 54 delegates in the Missouri caucuses and 39 delegates from Michigan's nominating convention. Joining me now, Christina Greer. So as you see there, Donald Trump has 97.8% of the vote in the Michigan caucuses. And you see there, Nikki Haley, 2.2%. Now looking at Idaho with 32 delegates at stake. As you see there, Donald Trump, now the projected winner of that state's caucuses, with 84.3% of the vote in for 21,151 votes. Nikki Haley with 13.8% of the vote. That's 3,457 votes. As you see there in the upper right corner, 57% of the vote in Idaho is in right now. The difference between Trump and Nikki Haley, there is 17,694 votes. And as we've mentioned, this is a big day for a Saturday when you've had 3 nominating contests, Missouri, Idaho, and Michigan. And as we've been reporting since we've been on the air at 6 o'clock, Donald Trump is a projected winner in Missouri. 54 delegates out of 54 awarded. He is the projected winner in Missouri, where 54 delegates were at stake. With 100% of the 99% of the vote in, he got 100% of the vote. 924. That's because that's the Missouri caucus. Nikki Haley there, 0.0%. She got 0 votes. And also, once again, And you see there the total delegates won. Donald Trump has 247 delegates. Nikki Haley with 24 delegates. Ron DeSantis has 9 delegates won, and Vivek Ramaswamy with 3. You're seeing live pictures of Donald Trump speaking right now in Richmond, Virginia. Okay, now let's go to Ayman Mouhideen, who has more on the results.
Yeah. Hey, Jonathan. It's good to see you. I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? You're looking at these results come in. You're seeing Trump talk right now. And, you know, you're looking at the number of delegates that Donald Trump has won, very far away from that threshold that is needed. But you certainly know that this race is all but done when it comes to the Republican nomination. And I think the question as we approach Super Tuesday becomes when Nikki Haley is going to drop out, because ultimately this is what is expected now in the political horizon for the Republican Party now.
Ayman, I wish I was watching you talk to me. I have no idea what you were. Oh, now I can hear you. Say that again.
I would say I'll give you the shorter version, and that was for me. When does Nikki Haley drop out of this race, given what we just saw, and given the fact that we're approaching Super Tuesday with this insurmountable lead by Donald Trump in the overall delegate count?
Yeah, I think come Super Tuesday, Ayman, it's going to be virtually impossible for Governor Haley to stay in the race. It's a huge chunk of the nation that will vote, a huge chunk of the delegates awarded. And I can't remember which state. There's so many graphics on the screen. Right. I think it was Missouri. 100% of the vote in. He got 100% of the vote, all the votes. And she got 0. So I think comes Super Tuesday, the governor will have to have a heart-to-heart and bow out of the race.
All right. Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But, Jonathan, thank you so much for teeing us off tonight. Greatly appreciate your show, as always, my friend. Great to see you. And welcome to Ayman. We're going to begin with that breaking news. You just saw Jonathan and I discuss the news out of Idaho. NBC News projects that Donald Trump won the Republican caucus in a landslide, taking home 32 of the state's delegates. Of course, it follows a string of wins for the Republican frontrunner today. NBC News also projects that Trump won Missouri's GOP caucus, taking home 54 of that state's delegates. And the last time Missouri Republicans held caucuses to allocate delegates was back in 2012. But this time around, they actually switched the party's presidential nominating system to caucuses after failing to set up a primary during last year's legislative session. And the rest of Michigan's delegates, 39 in all, were also awarded to Trump today amid a complicated and chaotic convention process. We'll talk about that later. Now, you'll remember that Trump already won this week's Michigan Republican primary. But again, as I mentioned, it is complicated this year since Republicans hosted both a primary as well as a caucus to award their state's delegates. And that, of course, is because the state of chaos in Michigan state legislature voted last year to move their presidential primary up to February. But that didn't fall in line with what Republicans wanted, and certainly the Republican National Convention's rules. So local and national party officials basically landed on this hybrid method that we're watching play out this week. And of course, adding to the confusion in all of this, both the current and former Republican Party chairs in Michigan had planned for dueling delegates or dueling conventions, causing delegates to receive conflicting information. Of course, as of now, and certainly for Nikki Haley, she is yet to win a Republican nominating contest. She still vows to stay in the race through Super Tuesday, which is next week. Haley telling Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker that her goal heading into March 5th is to have a, quote, competitive showing against Trump. Let's start this hour with Shaquille Brewster, NBC News correspondent. He is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Shaq, it's good to see you. So you are at the Republican convention speaking to us from there. Hardly a surprise with the way the results played out earlier today. Walk us through what they actually mean and what the Trump and Nikki Haley campaigns are saying about them.
Well, look, it was a good day for Donald Trump here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Of the 39 delegates that were up for grabs at this Republican caucus, Republican convention, Donald Trump won all 39 of them. When you go by delegate, he won 98% of the delegates who ended up voting in this entire process. And of course, this follows his large victory earlier this week, just on Tuesday here in Michigan for the primary being a more traditional election that we're used to, where you have everyday voters going to the polls. So bottom line, Donald Trump is getting an overwhelming share of the delegates to come out of the state of Michigan. And I talked to a lot of those delegates who were at the convention. The convention has since wrapped up, who drove in from all different parts of the state, and they were unified in their support for Donald Trump. Even those who say that they voted for Haley because they wanted they liked her for different reasons or might not have preferred Donald Trump, they said at the end of the day, they likely will be going to Donald Trump in the general election. This is Donald Trump continuing his march toward the nomination, toward Super Tuesday. We're looking ahead to that this upcoming Tuesday, and it's just another good day for Donald Trump here in the state of Michigan.
A lot of back and forth in the state's convention. Walk us through the vibe there between what is happening in the Republican National Convention between the two opposing camps.
Right. So when you look at the result, it's clear that the party was unified behind Donald Trump. These are party insiders who are going, delegates who are participating on a Saturday morning to go and cast their ballot. But if you look at the news leading up to this convention, up to this weekend's convention, you see this Michigan Republican Party is anything but unified. The previous chair, Christina Caramo, she held on to power essentially after being ousted back in January. She kept access to the email address. She had full access of the convention, of the GOP website, and she was going to have her own convention in Detroit. She was ousted in January. She took a contingency of Republicans with her and tried to essentially stop Pete Hoekstra, who is the Republican Party chair, now based on a judge. A judge had to come in and rule that he was the chair, essentially forced him to have another convention in Grand Rapids. So leading into this primary, into this weekend, there was a lot of confusion over where the convention would take place, what city the convention would take place, but ultimately it happened here in Grand Rapids. Pete Hoekstra is the chair, and Donald Trump won in an overwhelming sense.
All right, Shaquille Brewster live for us in Grand Rapids, Michigan this evening. Shaq, it's great to see you, my friend. Thank you, as always. With us now, Melissa Murray, who clerked for Justice Sonia Sotomayor when she served on the appeals court. Melissa is currently an NYU law professor and an MSNBC contributor. Also with us, MSNBC political analyst Jennifer Rubin. She is also an opinion writer for The Washington Post. It's great to have both of you with us. Jennifer, I'll start with you. Of course, we just got these results out of Idaho, Trump winning the caucus there, 32 delegates. Your thoughts on today's outcomes? Not a surprise, but nonetheless, anytime Donald Trump wins, you think of what we're getting closer to by the day.
I think it's deeply troubling that not only these voters, but millions of voters are lining up behind Donald Trump, who has declared that he will be a dictator on day one, who stripped away reproductive rights from millions of women, who is in the pocket of Vladimir Putin, who encouraged the Republicans in the House not to pass support for Ukraine, not to pass a tough border measure. This is deeply troubling. We have seen fascist movements in other countries, and I fear that we are having a large-scale, very right-wing, very dangerous movement emerge in the United States. And unless Democrats, independents, Republicans of goodwill turn out, we will see, frankly, the last free and fair election in our lifetime.
Let me ask you, Melissa, about Nikki Haley for a moment. She spoke with the media after her rally in North Carolina, saying that she has a movement of supporters behind her. I don't know where that is, but she certainly believes it. Watch this.
This is a movement, and to have an incumbent like Donald Trump not getting 40% in the early states, to have an incumbent like Donald Trump where he's campaigned in Michigan for 8 years, I campaigned in 2 days and got 30%, there is a movement here. And if you see, this is not an angry crowd. This is a patriotic crowd. This is a crowd that wants an America their kids can be proud of.
I certainly want to believe that there are Republicans in this country who do not subscribe to Donald Trump, and yes, that is to some extent true, but is what Nikki Haley describing there accurate? Does she have a point, or is it wishful political thinking on her part?
Well, the optics aren't great for her. She's gesturing to what appears to be a crowd of no one, but I will say that Nikki Haley is, if she's gesturing off screen, to something that we all know. Donald Trump is currently indicted on 4 different criminal indictments with 91 charges in total. And those 91 charges make clear that something is going on that is likely criminal before, during, and after his presidency. So at all stages of his life as a public official, he has been charged with doing crimes during this. And I think what Nikki Haley is hoping for here is that the fact of these indictments, these criminal trials, if they happen, will begin to sort of chip away at Donald Trump's lead. Now, she's been dealt a huge blow, we all were, this week when the Supreme Court declined to immediately deal with the question of immunity in that D.C. election interference case that Jack Smith has brought in the D.C. District Court. But she's holding on in the hopes that something will happen, that there will be some kind of accountability, and if there is, she will be the last candidate standing.
All right, Melissa, Jennifer, please stick around. We've got a lot more to discuss. When we come back, Trump turns to his favorite court tactic in his classified documents: delay, delay, delay. Will it keep him from facing the music before the November election? On this hour of Amen, who better to talk about Michigan politics than Michael Moore? He is with us to break down tonight's GOP convention's results and if the uncommitted movement could spell doom for President Biden's re-election campaign. Also this hour, the U.S. makes its first airdrops of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Is it enough, though, to help children on the brink of death? And wait until you hear about a Missouri law that has been in the books for half a century, banning women from divorce if they are pregnant. I'm Ayman Mohyeddin. Let's do it. This weekend, all eyes are on the GOP battle for delegates as Donald Trump wins the Republican caucuses today in Idaho and Missouri. The former president also swept Michigan's complicated and somewhat chaotic Republican convention caucuses, winning an overwhelming majority in each of the state's 13 congressional districts. In the end, Trump racked up the state's 39 delegates in today's conventions after winning the state's primary earlier this week. In Missouri, NBC News projects Donald Trump the winner of the Republican caucuses, winning all of the state's 54 delegates. Over in Idaho, Donald Trump won 32 delegates that were all up for grabs. As for Donald Trump, he is not in any of the caucusing states today. He's instead on the stump in Virginia and North Carolina, clearly feeling the momentum ahead of Super Tuesday.
Over the past few weeks, we've been on a rocket to the Republican nomination. It's been a rocket.
Now, let us not forget about Nikki Haley. Her campaign also in North Carolina today, stumping ahead of Super Tuesday. Despite today's outcomes in Missouri and Michigan, Haley vows to keep charging ahead despite failing to win a single primary contest thus far.
Now is the time we need a new generational leader that can put in 8 years, day and night, fixing the things we need fixed with no negativity, no drama, no vendettas, just real results for the American people.
Joining me now, Shaquille Brewster, NBC correspondent. He is live in Grand Rapids, Michigan for us. Shaq, it's good to see you again. So the caucus in Michigan was complicated, chaotic, messy. Explain to our viewers what exactly happened there.
Well, look, it was complicated and messy for 2 different reasons. For one, the process was going to be confusing, and that's because Michigan had a primary on Tuesday, but they also had this convention. 39 of Michigan's 55 delegates for the Republican nomination were going to be allocated this weekend at the convention. So because they had this hybrid process, that inevitably was going to be somewhat confusing. Donald Trump winning the overwhelming share of those delegates. But it was also confusing because there's a real divide in Michigan's state Republican Party, a divide that really wasn't settled until the past couple of days. There were 2 different people claiming to be the GOP chair. There were 2 different conventions that were supposed to happen in 2 different cities for today. That was until a judge earlier this week stepped in and declared that Pete Hoekstra is the actual correct chair of the Michigan Republican Party. I asked him about that divide heading into November and what that means and what that could mean. Listen to what he told me.
and clearly there's going to be some division, and there's going to be some hurt feelings, but those are starting to fall back, and people are going to start now saying, okay, we want to win in November. That's what political parties do. They help candidates win their elections, and that's what we will be focused on.
His message, despite the court battles, despite the rivaling conventions, he believes that Michigan Republicans will be unified. And if you at least look at the results in the delegate poll that Donald Trump has earned from today and from Tuesday's primary, you can see that this Republican Party here is really united behind Donald Trump. Ayman?
All right, Shaq Brewster live for us in Michigan. Shaq, good to see you as always, my friend. All right, back with today's Republican caucuses and conventions in Michigan, Missouri, and Idaho, because Super Tuesday is our next stop on the road to November. With me now, Democratic strategist Amicia Cross, who was an advisor to the Obama campaign. She is now a host at SiriusXM. And Jennifer Horn, former chair of the New Hampshire's Republican Party and co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Ladies, it's great to have both of you with us. Jennifer, how significant are today's caucus results in your eyes, especially when it comes to momentum ahead of Super Tuesday?
Well, what these results show is less new momentum or increased momentum and more just a continuation of what's been happening from day one. So many of us have said this. It's not just me. The nomination belonged to Donald Trump before the first primary took place. And what we saw in Michigan today, I mean, Nikki Haley, barely over 2%. And we know there's, more action coming on Tuesday. But there's simply no path for anyone other than Donald Trump. I think the question, the more significant question, is what do the results of Super Tuesday and the fact that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee, how does that bode for the people and how does that bode for the GOP? And in both cases, I would say not well.
Amicia, what, if anything, do Democrats take away from today as they face this inevitable second matchup between Donald Trump and Joe Biden?
Well, this honestly was the matchup that the Biden campaign actually wanted to have. So I think that this showcases that, Trump is still the commander of the Republican Party. Not that that's a surprise to anyone. But for Joe Biden, it also shows that Michigan is still competitive. I don't think there was ever a thought that it wasn't, but in particular, as it relates to what we just heard from Michael Moore in your previous segment, I think that the coalition that has been built against what we're seeing happening in Gaza right now is a very vocal and expansive coalition. And to be able to really win in a place like Michigan and to remain someone who is extremely competitive in that race, he's going to have to find a way to break away that coalition, showcase that there are some restrictions that need to be applied to the funding that Israel has steadily received from the United States. And I think he's going to have to make his call outs against what Netanyahu is doing and what the IDF is doing a lot stronger.
Well, in the last hour, former President Trump walking away with a significant chunk of delegates in the state of Michigan after winning the vote on Tuesday's state GOP convention. Fox Business's Grady Trimble is there in Grand Rapids to explain. Hey, Grady.
Hey, Arthel. It was a sweep for former President Trump today. 39 delegates up for grabs, all 39 going to Trump. About 98% of the state GOP representatives from all 13 of Michigan's congressional districts were here today voting for former President Trump over former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. So you see on your screen there the breakdown of delegates awarded in Michigan at both today's GOP convention and in the primary election earlier in the week. Former President Trump with 51 delegates. Haley won just 4 at that election on Tuesday. Now, when he announced the results about 45 minutes or so ago, Michigan GOP Chair Pete Hoekstra said, "This Michigan is Trump country." But when voters went to the polls in Michigan earlier this week, remember, around a quarter of them did pick Haley. Are you worried that some of those Nikki Haley voters won't come over and vote for Trump in the general?
I mean, historically, parties come together after primaries. November will be a binary choice. It's either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And I think a lot of those Nikki Haley voters are going to migrate over there. But no, we will work with them and invite them in.
Former President Trump also won Missouri's caucuses this morning. He won 36 delegates from that contest so far. There are more that will be doled out in a months-long process in Missouri. There are also contestants and delegates up for grabs in contests, I should say, and delegates up for grabs in Idaho as well as Washington, D.C. this weekend. But the bottom line, Arthel, is former President Trump is expanding his delegate lead over Haley leading up to Super Tuesday, when millions of Americans will go to the polls and more than 800 delegates will be doled out. Arthel?
Grady Trimble there in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Thank you. Eric.
So after former President Trump won this week's Michigan primary, the AP is calling today's caucuses at the state Republican convention for him as well. That extends his delegate lead over former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Trump has 212 delegates. She has 24. Grady Trimble is live in Grand Rapids with more. Grady.
Hey, John, two big wins for former President Trump today, adding to his delegate lead. It was a sweep here in Michigan at the Republican Party's primary convention. Almost all of the state GOP representatives who took part in today's convention, 98% of them voted for former President Trump over former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. So here's a breakdown of how the delegates in Michigan were divvied up at both today's GOP convention and in the primary election earlier in the week. Former President Trump won all 39 delegates today and 12 on Tuesday for a total of 51. Haley won just 4 on Tuesday. When he announced the results this afternoon, Michigan GOP Chair Pete Hoekstra said, "This is Trump country." But remember, when voters went to the polls in Michigan earlier this week, around a quarter of them picked Haley. Are you worried that some of those Nikki Haley voters won't come over and vote for Trump in the general?
I mean, historically, parties come together after primaries. November will be a binary choice. It's either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And I think a lot of those Nikki Haley voters are going to migrate over there. But no, we will work with them and invite them in.
So the former president picked up 51 delegates here in Michigan, 51 in Missouri at the caucuses there today, which he won as well. And there are also delegates up for grabs in Idaho and D.C. this weekend. But, John, the bottom line is the former president is expanding his lead over former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Trump now at 212 delegates, Haley at just 24. Of course, they're both a long way away from the 1,215 that they need to secure the GOP presidential nomination. John?
Many votes to come. Grady Trimble in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Grady, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Pavlich, along with Charlie Hurt, Joey Jones, and Kat Timp, and welcome to the Big Weekend Show, The Big Story Tonight. A Fox News alert as former President Donald Trump leaps closer to the GOP presidential nomination ahead of Super Tuesday. Trump's dominance over his final Republican rival, Nikki Haley, includes winning the Missouri Republican caucuses and taking all 39 of Michigan's allocated delegates at its GOP convention today. And in Idaho, 32 delegates are up for grabs tonight. Those results are expected any minute now. Both nominees trading jabs in separate campaign rallies earlier today.
The number one job of a president is to protect Americans. That's it. You can't protect Americans and prevent wars if you go put your head in the sand like Joe Biden, or if you go hide out and say you don't need friends like Donald Trump. Neither one of those works.
Get everyone you know to the polls so we can trounce Haley. If she's I haven't heard about her in about a week. Has anybody know? She was going around every show, Donald Trump, this and that. That wasn't working too well. No, we don't care about that.
Fox News business correspondent Grady Trimble is on the ground in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with more on the caucus results. Grady.
Hey, Katie, and it was a sweep for former President Trump here in Michigan today. 39 delegates up for grabs, all 39 of them going to former President Trump. In fact, almost all of the state GOP representatives who attended today's GOP convention, 98% of them went for former President Trump over the former South Carolina governor. So you can see there the breakdown of delegates awarded in Michigan when you tally up the 39 delegates today for Trump, 12 for him on Tuesday for that total of 51. Haley won just 4 on Tuesday. And when Michigan GOP Chair Pete Hoekstra announced the results this afternoon, he said, "This is Trump country." But remember, when voters went to the polls in Michigan earlier this week, around a quarter of them did pick Haley. So he told me the party's going to have to work to bring Haley supporters back into the fold if, in fact, Trump is the nominee in November. And that is looking increasingly likely. As you can see here, Trump is expanding his delegate lead over Haley with Super Tuesday approaching and millions more voters expected to make their voices heard. We also just got news from the Associated Press, Katie, that the former president has won Idaho as well. So that's just in, and that will add to his delegate count, which right now stands at 212, plus whatever number of delegates. I think it's around 31 delegates up for grabs in Idaho, too. So big day for former President Trump going into Super Tuesday, Katie.
Indeed. The delegate race is on. Thank you, Grady, very much. Appreciate it. All right. So Charlie Hurt, President Donald Trump was in Greensboro today, somewhere you're familiar with. He's also in Richmond.
Yeah, it took off right as he was landing.
There you go. So what is your take on the delegate count increasingly getting beneficial for Donald Trump?
Yeah, unsurprisingly, Donald Trump is rolling this thing up. He has now won every single one of the contests, most of them by double digits. Maybe perhaps all of them by double digits at this point. The idea that the party is somehow hopelessly fractured, I think, is completely wrong. Obviously, Donald Trump has to win over Nikki Haley's supporters. That's the whole point of having a primary and then having a general. And when you go into the general and you start talking about the general election issues, what are these people going to do? Vote for Joe Biden? They're not going to vote for Joe Biden. They're going to wind up voting for Donald Trump. Donald Trump obviously needs to court them and do his best. But the idea that Nikki Haley is going to sit there and attack him for all of the chaos, yes. Donald Trump brings with him a whole lot of chaos, but the reason he brings a whole lot of chaos is because nobody in Washington wants him. Nobody in the media wants him. And when you're an agent of change, you wind up bringing a lot of chaos with you. The other thing that's sort of amazing to me is that she attacks him, is saying, oh, well, he can't win a general election. What does she know about winning a general election? What does she even know about winning an election? She has lost every single one of these elections, including her own home state, and then she also lost by double digits to none of the above. So I think that, obviously, I guess she's got to sort of run her course. It's not going to end well for her, but this is exactly, it's going exactly in the direction that you would expect it to go.
Yeah. So speaking
of the grip for the former president over the RNC and therefore over the apparatus of the party. Now, we already see, of course, the former president's influence having been so strong for so long now. It's no longer a Trump insurgency. It's basically his party. If he gets these loyalists, and indeed a family member in Lara Trump's case, into these pivotal roles in the RNC, the takeover of the party will be basically complete.
Trump just won the Iowa and Missouri Republican caucuses, according to DDHQ. We're just getting that information right now. My producer telling me in my earpiece. Any surprises there, Niall?
Idaho, I believe, rather than Iowa.
Sorry, you're right.
But yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, no, got to get your I states correct. But yes, indeed. And no surprises at all. I think it's predicted at this point that the former president will sweep the field. Not a big shock that he has won these contests today. Won't be a big shock if he sweeps Super Tuesday. The only surprise maybe could come in Virginia, but I don't honestly expect Nikki Haley to win anywhere at this point.
Okay, Niall Stanage, we appreciate it and the real-time reaction. Thank you so much. We'll see you next hour.